that's part of the job, is that you're going to report on the truth
Hmm.
while knowing that there are people who hate you for it.
Yeah.
And so isn't it awesome that we're underpaid and people hate us
Yeah,
at the
well.
same time?
Welcome to Postgrads. Two Columbia J School alumni walk into a bar. Claudia, what do you think the punchline should be?
This is all off the record, right?
Oh, yeah, of course. As we all know, journalists never get drunk. You don't want them to get too political, right? Today, we have Claudia Gohn, who graduated as a part time student in 2025. She's a co founder of Grassroots magazine NYC and now an adjunct assistant professor at Columbia Journalism School. Thank you for joining us today, Claudia.
Thank you so much.
Of course. So, you have been in the Columbia community for so many years, including undergrad and masters. So, how do you like that, Upper West Side preppy scholar kind of environment?
Well, I spent pretty much my whole childhood
Hmm.
wanting to move to New York City. I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Virginia
Oh,
and desperately wanted to be in the big city. And so from a pretty young age, I knew I wanted to go to college in New York City. And when I was in 8th grade, I think, was when I decided I was going to go to Columbia. It wasn't
uh-huh.
even like I want to. I was like, that I'm going to do everything I possibly can to go to Columbia.
Hmm.
And so now that I'm sort of living exactly how I wanted to be living if I was to talk to my 13-year-old self. Um, yeah, so it's been great. It's been a really cool experience.
Would you say that New York City lived up to your expectation as a kid?
Well, I kind of envisioned it being a little bit more like Gossip Girl, but it's sort of like unrealistic to be living that lifestyle.
Yeah, well,
But when I was 13 watching Gossip Girl, I thought my life was going to be like Blair Waldorf, but
yeah.
that isn't it. But it definitely is, I feel like I am very privileged to be living the life I'm living right
Gotcha,
now.
gotcha. For years, Gossip Girl, that's Sex in the City for my girlfriend. So, I suppose we all live a life of soap operas.
I'm
So,
sure that a lot of girls who went to J school are like thinking of themselves as a Carrie.
oh yeah, of
Yeah.
course. So, being a part-time student, how do you manage your work-life study balance?
So I knew that if I got into Columbia J School that
Hmm.
I would have to do part-time. There
Mm.
was just no way that I was going to be able to do full-time. I just needed to work while going to school just to be able to pay for tuition and pay for rent and everything. So doing full-time grad school was sort of always out of the cards for me. It was really hard, and I did have a couple of like major breakdowns my first semester, especially because
We all
I
did, yeah.
had a pretty tough reporting class. And so it really just came down to like nose to the grindstone, like pushing through. And I think as time went on through J school, I learned how to take care of myself and prioritize my social life a little bit more. Just because when I have a healthy social life, I am just better at my job and like enjoy my life
Yeah.
more.
Do you think, as a part-time student, you got a little more experience in the field than a full-time student might?
Honestly, I think that the part-time students have the best J school
Oh
experience.
yeah, really?
Yes.
Walk me through that.
So that's what I actually tell applicants.
Uh-huh.
If they're able to do it, if they're able to swing it, you get to make money. You get to um, get different job experiences and real life world experiences. You get 2 years instead of one of making friends at
Oh
school,
yeah.
of forming connections with
Hmm.
professors, of getting jobs through those connections, either through friends or through professors. My I mean, I made some of the best friends that I'll ever have in my life. Like
Oh wow.
I just got engaged last week,
Oh yeah,
and thank
congratulations.
you so
Oh
much.
wow.
And I'm like planning on having one of my J school friends be one of my bridesmaids.
Yeah, of
Like I
course,
think
of
that
course.
like having 2 years together,
Hmm.
not only gives you the opportunity to report more and report while having that support system in
Hmm.
place of having your professors and peers,
Hmm.
but also to make friends and
Yeah.
just like grow your social life and network within
Hmm.
grad school.
Yeah, of course. You were at J school when the campus protest was
Hmm.
at its highest point. And you mentioned in the pre interview that the campus protest and the school's action also affected you personally.
Hmm.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so I went to, as you know, I went to Columbia for undergrad as
Hmm.
well as grad school. And in the year between undergrad and grad school, I was still working at Barnard. So I've
Hmm.
pretty much been on campus for my entire adult life since I
Hmm.
was 18. And so I have a pretty, I feel like, different connection to the Columbia umbrella and the campus in Morningside Heights than a lot of other people do and a lot of other students do. And so when I saw when I saw police coming onto campus, it felt really insane, for lack of a better word. Just because I never would have imagined having cops on campus, especially because there have always been protests on campus. Like it was always sort of like a joke that like, oh yeah, there's a protest every other weekend, you know, like there's
that's
just
fair,
protests
yeah.
all the time. Which I think was really cool and was like part of why I wanted to go to Columbia was because of how it's such a hotbed for social movements. And so then to see another protest by students who are very passionate about what they were speaking out about and for a very serious and very real thing that's happening. And to see the response was heartbreaking, honestly. And on the final police raid during the encampment, I was seeing cops dragging students away in, zip tie handcuffs next to my freshman dorm. And I like look at my freshman dorm and like that's where like I was, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, at Columbia for the first time in my life. And then I like sort of stood there puzzled being like, I can't believe that I started my Columbia life there, so optimistic, so in love with the campus, honestly, not to be cliche or like cheesy or anything, but in love with the campus. And now I'm here, really emotional, really trying to stay composed while I'm being threatened to be arrested if I don't go back to Pulitzer.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that feeling of that, striking image of just some people suddenly showing up where they don't belong, doing things they're not supposed to be doing. What would you say about the changes happening in Colombia these couple of years, either in policies or leaderships or environments in general?
Yeah, I mean, it's higher education, so there's always, big transitions and big movements. I knew, and my fiance knew too, because he went to Columbia with me, and we like would talk about how it was going to be a very big transition. And me and my friends were all interested to see how things would change. But I never knew that the changes would be Columbia's administration cracking down on student protests. It's been limiting to free speech. These policies have been limiting to journalism on campus. And
yeah, of course.
So as somebody who was in Spec too, the student newspaper, seeing Spec students get suspended for being inside Butler during the protests while they were reporting. It was overturned, but still seeing that was pretty upsetting as an alum and as a current student and as a former Specky.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And especially seeing the adversary from major news medias towards Columbia as well, like towards the students, which is relating kind of to this question. How do you think J School fit into all of this? I mean, like the biggest journalism story in the US was happening right at our home turf. Is that change our responsibility as both students and journalists?
I mean, I think that the encampment and coverage of the encampment did place a responsibility on the current journalism school students at the time, those who were safe to do so, especially like now with international students being threatened. Like, I think that even more so now, like students who are American citizens should feel even more pressure, in my opinion, to step up and do the coverage as well and take risks. But, whatever risk level, I respect anybody who doesn't want to like risk whatever. I think that J School it was really nice being there, not just because of, the privilege of having campus access and everything, but also because, I mean, we had professors there who were very supportive.
Oh, yeah.
My professors were incredibly supportive of my coverage.
As they should.
When it was the night between the Hinds Hall occupation and then the next day, the police raid, a a lot of students stayed overnight in Pulitzer, like
Mm-hmm.
slept on the floor. And Professor Khan
Mm-hmm.
literally brought like toothbrushes,
Oh wow.
deodorant,
Uh-huh.
like brought a bunch of like toiletries for us to
Uh-huh.
use to like support us
Right.
when we were reporting.
Mm-hmm.
And overall, we just had a lot of professors who were bringing us food,
Mm-hmm.
bringing us, you know, press
Mm-hmm.
signs. And overall, I think that you could talk to any student who was reporting on the encampment, and they would say that they would tell you the same thing, that we were incredibly supported
Yeah.
by our professors, including Dean Cobb.
Yeah, absolutely. And you reported very extensively on the protest. You wrote several articles on that. And my question is, we were taught in our first class, basically our first few classes in J school, that a journalist must be objective and unbiased in their reporting. How do you manage to do so while the story is so close and personal to you?
Yeah. So for me, I think that a lot of our coverage of the encampment was considered biased just because it did not portray the student protesters as like these evil, violent people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it depends on who you talk to. But for me, I just went in knowing that these were people, that these were human beings, and that what I'm witnessing is what I need to write.
Yeah.
You know? And so with that, though, of course, there's a lot of emotion. Like I mentioned earlier, just like being a former undergrad, there's a lot of emotion, regardless of how you feel. I just put on my journalism hat, you know, like I just pretend like I'm looking through everything through a camera and put those emotions aside, and you have to deal with them later.
Right.
But first, just like remembering that these are human beings, whoever you're reporting on are human beings, but also recognizing that you can't get emotional in the moment. Like,
Of course.
you have to hold on to that and then process it later in therapy or whatever you need to do.
Right.
If you can't even see it with your own eyes, there are governing bodies that have proven that what's going on in Gaza is a genocide, that there's a genocide in Gaza, just like how the WHO identified in 2020 that it was a pandemic.
Yeah, of course.
You know? And so I think that, but even that was controversial at the time. And of course, a bunch of people were like, it's fake, whatever,
Well,
it's a
yeah.
hoax. And so I think that that also just comes with the responsibility of journalism, where you're going to report the truth. And if you're going to report on a genocide, when you're going to report on a pandemic, you know, when you're going to report on climate change, there are going to be people who think that you're wrong, who think that you're like fake news.
Right.
But that's part of the job, is that you're going to report on the truth while knowing that there are people who hate you for it.
Yeah.
And so isn't it awesome that we're underpaid and people hate us
Yeah,
at the
wow.
same time? That's, I guess, just the job, but it's important. And I'm proud of, you know, doing the journalism that I'm doing, and proud of my colleagues who are doing this journalism, because it's hard.
Of course, definitely. So now let's talk about something more lighthearted. You are now an adjunct assistant professor at J School. Congratulations.
Thank you.
How would you describe that switch of your mindset from a student to now suddenly a professor?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I kind of had a little bit of an easier transition, I think, just because I've worked as a staff member at Barnard for a couple of years now. But the transition when I was 22 years old was a little bit hard, to be still working at an undergraduate school. And so it still is a little bit of a weird shift, just because like today in office hours, I was helping somebody who was like in their 30s and I'm 25. And it's like, it is a little bit of a weird transition,
Gotcha.
but it makes me think about a lot of things too. Like, is it weird if I report on campus activism as a professor?
Yeah.
Like, is it like, but like, where does my responsibility come in to like helping protect these students who are still reporting on activism at Columbia? And so
I know
those are-
professors who would join these activism, so I don't think it's that weird.
Yeah, I know. Those are just like, but these are like just sort of
Gotcha.
questions that I'm like, you know, I'm still trying to sort of work through what my role is at J School and my responsibilities as a professor. And so I'm just heavily leaning on my experiences with professors who were really supportive and played a
Absolutely.
big role in my own
Absolutely.
J school experience.
So in our previous conversation, you nominated Asma Khan and Rob Ibriano and Ida Alami as your favorite J school professors. What do you think these excellent professors have in common, and what make you think they're excellent?
All of them have a portfolio that is exceedingly important, exceedingly um, truthful, and so crucial to the archive that is our history in the United States, internationally. Robe has reported, I actually was helping him on a project last spring as a production assistant. But he's reported a lot on the criminal justice system in the United States and systemic racism in the United States. And Ida and Asma have both done really incredible international reporting as well. Ida does great immigration reporting. Asma does really great conflict reporting. I think that just personally, these are people who I've considered role models because of their reporting. And then also they always treated students like colleagues and with compassion.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it wasn't, I never felt like I was being talked down to, but more talked, with. And also they were just so generous with opportunities. That's why I got to work as a PA for both Robe and Ida. And so, and Asma hooked me up with a PA gig a month into school.
Oh, wow.
I'm not even kidding. She introduced me to this person at HBO, and I got a PA gig at
Jesus, that's so nice.
like a film screening. Yeah, it was so cool. So they've also, on top of that, been very generous people in general.
Yeah, of course.
But I feel very privileged to have had them as instructors and to have learned from them and witnessed their reporting firsthand.
And this is a little bit of curveball. Can you right now pitch me a class that you like to teach?
I have always really wanted to do, not always, within like the past year.
Sure. Yeah.
Eventually, I would love to do a class about reporting on social movements and protests. I think that that is something that's especially really important right now in the digital age, just because it's so different than reporting on social movements even, like 50 years ago, I think, or like even a couple of decades ago. Everybody has their phones out. Everybody has cameras. Multimedia reporting is so important to reporting on protests, but also the dangers that come with reporting on protests. Some of them are very much the same, police violence, but there's also an added like digital safety component that is something that journalists should talk about as well. Anyway, I just would love to do a class about that.
Now, you have co-founded the Grassroots magazine, OSC, and a lot of our classmates are currently contributing to that magazine as well. Can you give us an introduction of what Grassroots is and where did the idea of the magazine come from?
Grassroots magazine, in sort of a short summary, covers social movements and community-led organizing and grassroots movements in New York City, and covers their sort of networks, their impact, and the growth and shifts over time in the organizing landscape in the city. Carolyn Gavinsky approached me in June of 2024, which was about a month or two after the encampments. And we had reported on an article. We'd reported and published an article together for Al Jazeera in March of that year. So we had experience working together. And she approached me and was like, I think that there's a gap in reporting specifically on New York City activism. And I think that you and I should do something to fill that gap. And so we just started something together. We had a GoFundMe. We have a little Squarespace website.
That's awesome.
It's, I shouldn't say little. Like we published
a lot
of articles. Yeah. We, I think, have done some really great reporting. And we, like had a pretty good social media network and ended up getting a pretty great source network within the organizing community in the
That's so
city.
awesome. Yeah.
Like people knew about Grassroots when I went to protests.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's been a really great experience. I've gotten newsroom leadership experience and reporting experience. It's been great just like being able to like go out and like report whatever.
Can you give us a little definition of what a grassroots movement might be?
Yeah. So, there are lots of different ways that activism and organizing can come about. But some of the best movements and some of the most powerful movements have come from very small, tight knit, and humble local activists who start small, not with a lot of resources, but with really great and powerful intentions and with goals. And so start with something small and end up building up on top of that. So we're just starting at the grass level, right? And then we're just building up from there. And so that's really what I think grassroots organizing is all about, and is something that really represents larger movements within the country, within politics, national and local, and can sometimes show you seeds of what is to come within activism and within broader like trends and motivations and political happenings in the country.
Of course. New York City recently elected a new mayor, Zora Mandani, starting next year, who many believe is a bona fide grassroots politician. And recently, there are also other grassroots politicians that are, showing up on social media, such as Graham Plattner, this oyster farmer in Maine, is running for senator. So, why do you think grassroots movements and politicians are suddenly gaining popularity these years?
I mean, I think that especially with social media and especially with, I think, a rising political consciousness among our generation, people are more able to spread their message and also grow a movement. Really, a special thing about Gen Z and millennials has been challenging the status quo and really valuing that, grassroots organizing.
What I think is also, like you mentioned, that Gen Zs are getting more political conscious, is also the fact that we are growing up and like we are more and more so exercising our right to vote. And then we're looking for people who can actually represent us, right? Like those old school politicians who are founded by billionaires and corporations that got nothing to do with us, right? We need somebody that we truly like, that we can truly trust. So I suppose that's where also the grassroots politicians are coming from. At the end of our show, we always give a guest a few minutes to just monologue away. And I want to give you this prompt. Now, as a founder of a magazine and an educator, what would you advise to the people who are curious and passionate about journalism, but are still a little on the fence about getting into the industry?
Okay, so I never really want to push anybody into journalism just because it is difficult. And it's tough. And I would never push anybody into a field that doesn't pay that well, to be honest, just because, like, I don't know, your situation. Like, it's tough. And you can get a lot of hate online and you can get a lot of hate in person. And the hours are hard. And, I think that, I want to say that you can accomplish anything you want, and I think to a certain extent that is true. But it is very cliquey, and it is hard to break into, and not everybody can just go to grad school and just like pay for it or like take out a bunch of loans for it. And so I don't ever want to be like only optimistic. Like there are serious negative sides of journalism, but I think that if you're looking for a way to make an impact and to contribute to something larger than yourself, journalism is a really great way to do that. It's a calling. It's something that often people feel like there's no way they couldn't be a journalist, At least that's how I feel, how a lot of my friends feel. I'm not an activist. I'm not, a scientist. I'm not a politician, but I think that I'm able to make the change and impact that I want to make through journalism, or at least that's what I'm hoping to do. It's what I attempt to do. Um, it gives you a lot of flexibility. It gives you a lot of opportunities to um, shape um, the media to in a way that is more honest and that is more truthful. And I really want my journalism to really contribute to an archive that people can look back on and see what happened and see the truth of what was going on at the time. And so if that's something that you're into and that's something that you feel passionate about, I think that journalism is an excellent way. It's not about like immortalizing your work. It's more just about making sure that, you know, people 10, 20, 30 years down the line knew what happened, and don't get a warped perspective or don't get a warped or untruthful view. I think for, the encampment, I think that if there were no student journalists on campus, a lot of the coverage that people look back on in 20 years would be incorrect. But that's a different conversation. And I think that for me, I just love being a storyteller. And so if you consider yourself a storyteller, journalism is a really beautiful way to pursue that mission and to follow that sort of internal drive to tell stories. And whether that impact is just on the person who now feels like heard, or somebody who read a story and felt heard, even if it's just one, or if it ends up contributing to a policy change. All of that is, I think, really important and stuff that you can do with journalism that I think is really special.
Of course, of course. That's Claudia Gohn, and stay tuned.